Greetings, everybody. Good morning. It's nice to be here with you all on a rainy Thursday morning. Welcome to my class on independent media, and certainly welcome Professor Shack's class. Professor Shack couldn't be with us today, but I'm glad that some of the students are here. Special thanks to, of course, to Park Productions for being here and recording for us. I'm Mickey Huff, the Distinguished Director of the Park Center for Independent Media. I'm a professor of journalism here at the Roy H. Park School of Communications. I'm also the director of the Media Watchdog Project Censored and president of the Media Freedom Foundation. So the kind of work that we do is specifically around news literacy, but more broadly, critical media literacy education. And we work to support a true and vibrant free press. Some of you then may say or wonder how AI fits into all this, and our wonderful expert guests are going to talk to us about that today. So I'm going to be, I'll get into a proper introduction for them. And they have a presentation to share with you, but they're also very interactive. So they're definitely going to be talking with you, and they're hoping that you're going to talk with them, and we'll have a good dialogue going on here this morning. Anybody that wants to stick around afterwards and maybe talk to them a little more, feel free to do that. I have the great pleasure of having them in my first year experience class this afternoon, and then at 3 o'clock today in the Park building, we'll be either in the Park Lounge or the Ithacan over in that corner over there. And they'll be there to talk with people, so if you have more questions or you want to talk specifically about something, they're going to have a little bit more of an informal session around 3 o'clock this afternoon for those that are interested. So once again, welcome to all of you for coming here today, including members of the community that are here with us. So it's nice to see you all. Much appreciate your support for the Park Center for Independent Media. On the back table, there's information. So if you don't know that, thank John. Yeah, there's the information on the back table about the Park Center for Independent Media, Project Censored, the work we do, how you can get involved if you're interested or moved by any of this work. We do several events a year, including the large IZZY Award in the spring that gives the award for independent journalists each year. This year coming up will be the 18th annual IZZY Award, April 22nd, so please save the date if you're interested. Also, we have upcoming, just real quick, I want to make sure that you know that in addition to having Dr. Nolan, Higdon, and Dr. Allison Butler with us here today, on November 12th, we have the award-winning independent journalist and filmmaker Abby Martin from the Empire Files. We're going to be screening her new documentary. It's called Earth's Greatest Enemy, and the Pentagon being the world's largest polluter. And on November 18th, we have independent journalist Will Potter, and he'll be talking about his book on the ways, it's called Little Red Barns, and it's a follow-up on his book Green is the New Red, which looks at increasing fascistic tendencies in government, particularly to target climate and animal rights activists. So Will Potter will be here on the 18th, and as ever, you're invited to attend freely, as is the public, and I encourage you to come meet our guests and interact with them. You never know who you get to meet and who you get to network with and how it might impact your trajectory both as a student and as a professional. So hopefully you'll take advantage of those things while you're here. Without further ado, we are joined today, as I mentioned, by Nolan, Higdon, and Allison Butler. They're going to talk to us. Their title is Grappling with Privacy at the Future, Making Sense of Surveillance Technologies and GenAI in Education. You'll see that they're going to have a PowerPoint slideshow, so I'll go ahead and pull that up, so you can see what they have going on here. Let me properly introduce our talk and then each of our guests, and we'll cut right to it. In this interactive, as I mentioned, presentation, critical media literacy scholars Higdon and Butler will share information on the state of surveillance technologies and generative AI in education, with a focus on how instructors can expand their own understandings of these technologies and how they can work with their students in their classrooms to expand their shared knowledge and push back against invasive digital practices. Allison Butler is a senior lecturer, associate chair, and director of media literacy certificate program in the Department of Communication at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where she teaches courses on critical media literacy and representations of education in the media. Butler co-directs the grassroots organization Mass Media Literacy, where she develops and runs teacher trainings for the inclusion of critical media literacy in K-12 schools. She serves as the vice president on the board of the Media Freedom Foundation, is the author of numerous articles and books on media literacy, most recently Educating Media Literacy, The Need for Teacher Education in Critical Media Literacy from 2020, Surveillance Education, Navigating the Conspicuous Absence of Privacy in Schools, co-authored with Nolan Higdon, Butler is also co-author of multiple practical resources for media literacy media literacy education, including open source text, critical media literacy, and civic learning, interactive explorations for students and teachers. And the only text on critical media literacy for young readers, co-authored with Nolan, Higdon, myself, and several other people. It's a book called The Media and Me, A Guide to Critical Media Literacy for Young People. Allison's currently working on a project on pop culture representations of women. In fact, Allison's basically done with that. The Censored Press that I also am involved with is publishing that this spring, actually supposedly on International Women's Day. The book is titled The Judgment of Gender, How Women Are Centered and Silenced in Pop Culture. So please welcome Dr. Allison Butler. And also, please welcome Nolan Higdon. He's a founding member of the Critical Media Literacy Conference of the Americas. He is a Project Censored national judge, author and university lecturer at Merrill College in the Education Department at the University of California, Santa Cruz, among other institutions. Higdon's areas of concentration include podcasting, digital culture, news media history and propaganda, and critical media literacy. All of his work is available at his Substack under his name, Nolan Higdon. He's the author of The Anatomy of Fake News, A Critical News Literacy Education, Let's Agree to Disagree, A Critical Thinking Guide to Communication, Conflict Management, and Critical Media Literacy that we co-authored in 2022. As I mentioned, he's also a co-author with us on The Media and Me, A Guide to Critical Media Literacy for Young People. He is a regular source of expertise for CBS, NBC, the New York Times, and the San Francisco Chronicle. He also has a new program for this year. It's a podcast called The Disinfo Detox, and he also is the creator of the Gaslight Gazette column. And I know several of my students are going to have opportunities to work with and do some more with Dr. Higdon, as he's probably going to very soon be doing more research with us as a fellow at the Park Center for Independent Media. So please welcome Dr. Nolan Higdon. Without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to our experts, and they're going to have a presentation, interact with you, then we'll do Q&A, and I will run around like Phil Donahue style with the microphone, the late, great Phil Donahue. So if you have questions and comments, I'll try to get to you with the microphone so everybody else can hear you. So with that, I want to thank all of you for coming today, and Allison and Nolan, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mickey, and thanks so much for having us. This is just a really great opportunity to talk about some of our work, but also, as Mickey has said, to hear from you, right? We have this whole PowerPoint slideshow. We can go through it. We actually really don't have that much of an interest in doing that because that feels like us kind of talking at you. So one of the things that we're going to do is make this available in case anybody wants it for reference. We've got references in here. If it's something that you can use to sort of guide your thinking, fabulous. Part of what makes it exciting to talk about surveillance technologies and generative AI at this point is that this is one of those times in a technological development where all of us, despite all of our different backgrounds, some of our backgrounds maybe being a little bit longer and lengthier than others, I just called myself old, but in a stealth way, is that we're all learning this together at the same time. And one of the things that we can see from our past technological developments and our past media developments is that oftentimes, I think there's two really big things that happen with a new technology. One, we all, wherever we are with that technology, live in this space of fear and fascination, right? The new tech is either something that we're terrified of or that we're so fascinated by, and both of those polar opposites mean that we aren't actually looking very critical at the technology. I think another thing that happens is that when a new technology is introduced, the structure behind that technology, most often in the United States, the corporate for-profit structure behind that technology does a lot to separate us and to show us how different we are. And part of what we think we can do with surveillance technologies and with generative AI, both, in education, because here we are at a college, but just like in life, to be honest, is to say, no, wait a minute, y'all don't get to divide us. This is something that we can learn about together, right? So much of our work together and separately in critical media literacy is to try and kind of break down some of the silos that get set up so that we're all kind of isolated and alone. our work is to kind of undo that and to say, hey, let's sort of talk about this together. So formally, we've got some stuff to talk about. Surveillance technologies, legality, the legality and culture of surveillance, opportunities and threats, where we are with generative AI. We want to always, always, always provide practical support. And then what can we do for you? What do you need? But really, we want to take it away from this PowerPoint, leave that for you as a reference, and more have a conversation.
Yeah, well said. And thanks again, everyone, for having us here today. This is great to be able to speak to you all about this. I should also say the work that we're mostly talking about here today comes from a book Allison and I published earlier this year called Surveillance Education. And it was an interesting exercise to write this book because we were initially concerned with the ways in which students in particular are being surveilled in schools with these tools and the threats that poses to them, but also in which ways we can resist it. So we were focused on doing that work, but we were also very aware at this time that the AI speculation was taking off, and there was a lot of talk about what was coming down from AI in the future to education. So as we're writing the book, we notice the things we're writing are getting outdated day by day as this new technology emerges. And so what we did with the book, we tried to take a broad overview, something that's still applicable even in the age of AI, and we both continue to follow the development of AI. And as Allison said at the beginning, we're in the middle of figuring this out. I think this is one of the points of frustration. There's this big move, particularly by industry, to integrate AI throughout all of our lives. Everything we do, they're putting pressure on folks to get it in every device they use. But they really don't understand the tech, and it really can't do what they say it's going to do. So I don't know where that's going to leave us. Sure, maybe it's not a big deal if instead of taking notes, we AI generate notes or something like that. But what about when it's deciding who gets a job, or who's worthy of healthcare, or who's worthy of insurance, or what your sentence should be for a criminal charge? That's where things, I think, get really dicey. And so that's where we're kind of focusing on this larger social context, not to mention the negative implications on education as well.
So I'm going to jump forward again from a bunch of these slides and get us kind of into where we're at with AI. And this is where we're going to sort of first turn it over to you for some questions and thoughts and sort of your position here. This is sort of where we seem to be in generative AI right now, and where this arrow is kind of pointing to where most of us probably live is somewhere in this murky middle, right? I'm sure you're all familiar with this idea that all y'all are cheating, right? I mean, that might be the presumption on the first day of class, is that every single person in college is cheating, right? We can read this in the newspaper, we see this in the headlines, we hear this in all, and I love phrases like that. All students are cheating. First of all, how on earth would we know that? Like, there is no way to know that really all, like 100% of people don't do anything, right? All students are cheating all the time, are that the sort of outrageous headlines we get. We will no longer know how to think, let alone think critically. The machine is going to take over. Many of us might be sitting in this room with the AI ignorance of it all. Like, I'm not interested in using AI. I'm not interested in learning about it. Many of us might think, like, I don't ever actually use it. You're probably wrong about that, because it's embedded into so much of what we're doing, but we don't necessarily seek it out, right? Any one of us with a smartphone, we're using AI these days. Any one of you that lets, any one of us that lets our word processing program or our emails kind of complete our sentences, we're using AI. It seems a little not a big deal, okay, fine, but that's where we're at in this sort of really slippery area here. AI confusion, right? I mean, I certainly put myself in this bubble a lot, which is like, what is it exactly, right? What is it doing to us? There's some of that fear. Am I being left out of a conversation? Also fear, like, am I not catching up on stuff? Am I missing something? And then the flip of that is this AI utopianism. AI is going to solve all of our problems. It's going to change work. It's going to change productivity. It's a shiny object, right? It's brand new and it's shiny, so it feels like something we should really, really, really be paying attention to. But let's go back to confusion. What is it exactly? So I think if we can for a moment, Phil Donahue, sir, if you don't mind running around a little bit. What are you guys thinking, right? Good, bad, the ugly. There's no judgment here. It's really like sort of, what are your experiences with AI? No, let's start with you. What do you think about it? Where do you live with it? Where do you...
Hi, thank you for being here. I think I'm in this like weird middle zone where I acknowledge that it exists. It's here and it's now more being readily accepted. I notice in certain classes and certain like job opportunities now people are more willing to like, AI is here, where like 2 years ago everyone's like, if you're caught using AI, like it's instantly plagiarizing, it's instantly like you're not doing your work. So there's attitudes changing, so I think at some point we're gonna have to learn to work with it. I'm not thrilled, but I'm also not terrified. I'm like in this weird middle thing where it's like, I wish it wasn't as strong as it is, but like I recognize that like people use Grammarly and stuff and that's AI too. Like there's certain things that we all use.
And can I, before you give the microphone back, if I could ask you a question, what year are you?
I'm a senior.
So are you thinking about a job or grad school?
I'm like already like putting out applications for jobs and stuff. So it's, since I'm a journalist, I want to continue to do this work. It's like interesting because in my industry, I'm a little bit more hesitant about seeing AI. Like,
Okay.
There's dangers, especially with like racial profiling, the way like language writes about like certain demographics and how it writes about certain crimes compared to others. Like that's not really part of journalistic ethics. So that's more of my concern.
And are you seeing it in your job applications? Are you seeing language of to be familiar with AI or to know how to use it?
In certain ones, and other ones it's more like a neutral tone, where before it was a lot more like you shouldn't be using it, but now it's more like, oh, like it might be used during editing and stuff, where it's like, okay, well, it's not in this like danger zone yet in my opinion, but like it's every inch closer, unless we set like standards and expectations, is closer to where like, oh, they wrote quick stories. Like I have run into news pages that was just places I was looking where it's like, this was written by AI, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Openly, this is a real news source and it's written by AI, like it's, for me, that's icky.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Ross.
Hi, thank you for being here. So I'm an environmental science major, and so I think my first impression of AI was very negative because a couple years ago when we would start to have discussions about it, it was just about environmental impact. And so that was my first impression, but I think it's really interesting to kind of piggyback off of that. In this semester specifically, I think that the dialogue from my professors have changed a lot, where honestly sometimes they're encouraging us to use it with just different things that we're working on. And so that's been a really interesting shift to see, just because it was so negative from the perspective of professors within that department, and now it's more like lenient, I think. So, yeah.
So I think that's really interesting that you say that your early conversations with it were about the environmental impact. I think that is one way, and maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but I do think that is one example of how we can all be kind of siloed and compartmentalized, because I think there are other areas of study, my area of study, communication, where we didn't start by talking about the environmental impact. Some of us in media studies had to kind of catch up to the environmental impact conversation because we started with the, what is it doing to human communication? What is it doing to mediated communication? And then later on was, oh right, there is this huge environmental impact that we've forgotten about, right? That is a way to kind of keep us separated. You and I in that situation are having two very different conversations with what happens when we start talking with each other, right? So the idea that we're getting separate entries to this, I think is great. Let's all get separate entries so that we can then communicate with each other. But it's that communicate with each other part that often gets left out. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, the environmental concerns are extraordinary, and then when you couple in other factors, environmental racism is a big deal because of where the data centers often end up, which is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, if I can just add to that real quick, I was going to bring this up too with the environmental impact. The data centers obviously are having a negative impact on the environment, but they're putting them in poor communities, communities of color as well. Not just because the land is cheaper, but also they're able to leverage the local government to give them subsidies, where the local poorer folks, local poor folks, disproportionately people of color, are paying for the electricity for the data center. So their electricity rates are going up while their environment's getting destroyed. So that's a key part of it as well.
And at the same time that their electricity rates are going up while the environment is getting destroyed, they're being lied to about their electricity rates going up because they're being told, let us, the electric company, let us help you by shifting your access so you get less hot water at peak times, or you get your air conditioner temperature goes up instead of down at peak times. So us, the electric company, we're going to support you in your, no, that's only happening to these homes and to some small businesses. It's not happening to the data centers. They get what they want. So the poor are, and the disenfranchised are supporting these massive data sites and destroying the environment. Yeah.
Which this is going on in Lansing nearby now, where there's a proposed data center, and
Yeah.
some of the folks in this room are already writing about it and researching it, and so
Excellent.
that's very good to see. And the paper here, the Ithacan, is doing some of
Nice.
that coverage as well. Just to represent all the no generative AI guys, that's me. So there still is someone around that says, I don't want you doing that. I want you to write your own paper. I want you to think for yourself. You can have other people do it for you later. Anybody else? Let's see. More people, more folks. Yeah, let's go.
I am one of those faculty members of strictly no Gen AI, but I'm not. I'm not one of the faculty members that gives a zero, right? I just really believe that if we create a more engaged classroom and different attendance policies and assessment strategies, we can make achieving these critical thinking goals more likely. And students want to feel confident that they can make it. It's when they don't feel confident and they're stressed and they feel like they're boxed into a corner, that even when they personally don't want to use AI, they feel like they would have to.
Yeah.
And so I understand there's really complicated reasons for usage. My thing is that I think sometimes in conversations I have with faculty and students, it all comes down to, well, it's capable of doing X, right? And it can do these good things. And I have, look at this excellent use case in my class. But we're missing the forest for the trees, right? It's that these companies are not on our side. They don't care about us. So why are we acting like these tools are helping us, right? I think we really have to start, if we're gonna talk about training kids for the workforce, I would like to teach them how to labor organize, frankly. I would like to teach them how to fight corporations. I want to send them into workplaces so that they change those workplaces, not so that they conform to the ideology of those workplaces, right? So I think we're really missing the right framing around these conversations, and we're not getting mad at the right people. Instead, they're doing exactly what you're saying, which is turning us against each other,
Yep.
right? And in fact, Perplexity released an ad that was trying to get students to use their new latest browser, Comet, and they did this by saying, hey, your professors are using AI, so here's a good way to get back at them. Because they know they're not getting anywhere with faculty, so now they decide to prop us up as villains. And this is turning students against professors.
Yes.
And I find this incredibly frustrating. I'm trying to bring attention to these issues, and it feels like with the increased acceptance in classrooms that our resistance is wearing down because it's in everything, and I find that troubling.
Yeah.
So,
I think, what's your name again, sorry? Priya, thank you so much. I 100% agree, and I think just for some of remind us how we got here. I do think it is an impressive achievement what's been done in AI from a human ingenuity perspective, and I think sometimes that's lost in the conversation. We make it into a binary of you either love AI or hate AI. I find it very impressive. I think it can do, as you pointed out, some really incredible things. But my critique is the same as yours. It's that it's monopolized by a handful of companies who not only put profit over people. Really, all of Silicon Valley, its history is about believing humans are problems that need to be fixed. Silicon Valley is an anti-human industry by definition. You go back and look the early foundational writings of the industry, they talked about how their goal was to replace the human brain because humans make mistakes and need to be fixed. AI is introduced in the same way. So to your point, there's so much emphasis now on education about training people on AI, but where I live, in the heart of Silicon Valley, there's giant billboards that say, replace humans now. There is big support in the industry to get rid of humans out of the workforce. So there's a lot of writing also about training on AI is not really training the worker, it's training the AI to replace the worker. So it's couched as kind of we're preparing students for the 21st century economy, but really we're preparing students to get exploited, is the ways in which AI deals with that. And there's a long history of that, but I think what I was going to say is part of the reason why I think the conversation initially focused on cheating. There was a lot of folks who I think stuck their kind of head in the sand with AI the first couple of years it emerged, and in that created a vacuum where industry really dominated the conversation. They were able to do what Silicon Valley does so well, overpromise and underdeliver. It's going to solve every single problem. You guys got to invest now, and that's how you get a speculative bubble. Well, people who had the critiques that like you're bringing up and others, they were not amplified as much in the conversation. Now I think we're at a point where folks who are critical, speaking for myself, are now trying to catch up with that corporate conversation, which has dominated so much of the discourse on AI. Because, and I'm blanking on what it stands for, but the MERV Center is one of the oldest AI research centers in the United States. And they say that we're who you avoid going to if you want to make money in the AI industry. Essentially, they've always been a wet blanket on AI and its potential. And they point out in here that not even industry understands what AI is or does. We still don't, the people who are making it do not understand. And they wrote a book, it was titled something like, No Matter Who Builds It, We All Die.
Right.
And the argument was essentially that we're building this thing and we see it do these things like try to manipulate humans or try to bamboozle humans or fabricate things or manipulate human beings to do things. We don't know why it's doing that, and now we're putting it out in the world. And that's their big fear, is what's going to happen when it has things like war capabilities and such. So totally agree.
Yeah.
Great point.
Which, by the way, just for quick shameless plug, we've been at Project Censored doing AI Military Watch series with Peter Byrne that talks about how AI is being used in military. And none other than Bob McChesney, the late great media scholar who was influential in helping with the beginnings of the Park Center here, he wrote a book a long time ago called Digital Disconnect that warned exactly about what you're saying right now. It's well come to pass.
So one of the things that, sorry. Oops, my bad, sorry. This is why I don't like using PowerPoints, because I'm not good at it. So one of the things that Nolan and I do a lot in our work is try and find that sort of in-between space, right? I've said it a couple of times, that kind of murky middle, and sort of see where we can be within that to look at multiple angles. So we're trying to find some sanity here, right? Everything is so, there's so much chaos, there's so much noise, it's really hard can be really hard to kind of focus, right? Particularly now, not just about AI, but just kind of the world that we live in right now is sort of a fire hose, to use that metaphor, where things are just coming at us so fast and furious. Sometimes I have to stop and remind myself that it is, well, the second to last day of October, right? We've been in this current presidential administration for less than a year, but it feels so huge, right? So trying to find a little sanity in all of this chaos often means slowing down, right? Our media environment today, particularly social media, but not exclusive to that by any stretch of the imagination, and including in that AI, encourages us to move quickly, right? Think about the time that you spend on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. It's not good time, it's not bad time. I'm not putting a value judgment on it, but it's super easy and encouraged by the technology to just sort of scroll through it, right? And we let a lot of stuff wash over us. Maybe you're paying attention to the algorithm and you go, gosh, I keep getting the same stories about whatever, right? I spent a fair amount of late September, early October watching bear videos because it brought my heart rate down and it made me happy. And now I am a little happier because almost my entire Instagram feed is wild animal pictures, and I am very happy about that. It feels like, but that means like that is telling me that like there's something happening, right? So our job is to kind of slow down and parse some of this stuff out. So we have some language here from some different sources, and we want to kind of play around with it a little bit, right? AI has the potential to be a thought partner in the early messy stages of our work. This is what's coming to us from some folks who are AI celebrationists, right? Which then begs the question, but what happens when we no longer have messy work as our foundation for learning, right? I'm a big fan of your first draft, your first thoughts, your first whatever, let them be a hot mess. Throw them against the wall and see what sticks. There's nothing the matter with that. And yet I think we live in a time where our first draft is supposed to be perfect and awesome and flawless. And that is, to your point, I mean, some of the pressures that are getting put on all of us, right? And then that pressure also works as a division between faculty and students. No, students, ask your faculty. Our first drafts are a hot mess, right? They're bad, but that makes them good because it's getting it out there. Let's let ourselves be messy. If we let something else be messy for us, where is our own learning? And let me tell you, at certain points in the semester, it might be like, oh, learn it later. I need to get this done. But that is going to catch up to us, right? Some of the splashy headlines right now, I like to think about these again, trying to complicate them, but my gut reaction is, yeah, which is usually means I gotta think more carefully about it, that what you compromise in college, oh, I'll just let GenAI do this for me, catches up to you in the workforce or in grad school and you get fired. Again, I don't know if there's actually evidence for this, but it feels like this is one of those school marmy kind of old lady ways of saying, don't do this because you're gonna get in trouble later, right? It's like so many things that my parents told me when I was a teenager, right? AI has the potential to eliminate work-related drudgery. Really? Like, it doesn't do it all on its own. Somebody still has to monitor it. Some of our work is going to involve drudgery. Okay, that's work. What do we think about that? How do we think, why are we trying to get rid of that as opposed to thinking more carefully about it? Yeah, of course.
On that point too, for those who weren't alive, I keep saying I feel like I'm back in 1993. This was exactly the promise of the internet. It was going to replace all these jobs. We were all going to be out of work. And Mark Blythe, who's a political economist from Brown, he does a good job of tracking the history of these claims. And he points out that yes, always some jobs do disappear with technology, right? But he points out they always inevitably create more jobs. Like this idea of like everything becoming AI would be just, historical like anachronism is what he's basically saying. So I think that's important to remember too. It behooves industry to keep saying AI is going to take all these jobs. That's how they get more people to invest and continue the speculative bubble. But we haven't really seen the rubber hit the road yet. And I don't think it will, and folks like Mark Blythe don't either. So you got to kind of remember that a lot of this stuff is based on speculation from industry, not on hard data or knowing the future.
And if we learn the future, if we try and learn the future from the past, AI in whatever capacity it is in now is going to explode, deflate, and then probably become something else, right? AI, we cannot forget, is human-made. We don't necessarily know the humans, right? I don't know any of them, but it is human-made, which means it carries with it human bias. Yes, AI feels like even more so than the internet, the world is at our fingertips, but it is a world that is still constructed by humans. It is constructed by a very small number of very particular humans, which means the everything that we all have access to all the time, I'm using these generalizations on purpose, right, is very much matching the foibles of humans, right? And as we've said a couple times, and I think we need to keep saying over and over and over again, AI remains in the realm of large corporations. So with whom is it partnering? And to whom is it actually listening?
Yeah, and on that point about the bias, there's we all experienced a really great example of this with Grok AI, which is Elon Musk's AI. Somehow, I don't know where this complaint came from, but he thought Grok, this were his words, was too woke. So he was going to change the algorithm. And it was just within about 24 hours that people who were talking about anything but South Africa got messages about how there's a white genocide in South Africa. Like Grok would tell them this even though they didn't ask about it, which is it's not true. It's a false story. And then it was just about a week later, Grok AI started introducing themselves as Mensch Hitler and spreading white supremacist content. So that's what it means to be not woke from Elon Musk. But it was clearly a change in the design, changed what folks ended up getting out of it. That's the lesson. So whatever the designers did that. But AI also can learn from data as well, and the most readily available data is what's on the internet. And this is where we get a feedback loop of doomerism. The internet it's in its commercial form, has incentivized content that appeals to hate and fear. That's the stuff that goes furthest and fastest. The ways in which social media is designed really plays to that. So we're taking some of the worst kind of content and dialogue to inform these AI bots, and then we have, according to OpenAI, 1 million people asking the bot about whether or not they should consider suicide and things like that. And the information is coming from internet's discourse and things like that. So it's a really bad doom loop. When we say bias, it's not just like they have a preference for Democrats or Republicans. This is a serious bias towards some problematic human behaviorisms that are amplified by AI.
And if we're talking about the internet and we're talking about AI and we're talking about popularity, really the thing that we should be talking about is pornography. If anybody has ever read any internet pages talking about like the #1 or the top 10 websites, or, we really love a good list from the internet, right? And there was, the top website for X, Y, and Z. What we really actually need to know is that whenever we get top 10 lists of like legitimate websites, that's what they're going to share with us publicly. Because really, the top 10, 100, 1,000 is pornography. Pornography drove the development of the internet the same way it drove the development of other technologies. We can have that conversation in a different place if you'd like. This is one of the things that we are now seeing come to fruition with AI, is AI-generated erotica or pornography, and what that means then for the way in which it gathers and distributes information, which I think will ultimately give us much more information about how our society feels about women, how our society feels about violence, how our society feels about race, etc. Because and pedophilia, exactly, because pornography really is very much responsible for driving a lot of technological development. So we see with AI that it might lack a moral compass. To Nolan's point about suicide ideation via AI and pornography via AI, is therefore then going to be kind of put back into the mix of these large language models. And as we've said and will continue to say, there's a lot of it that it gets wrong, and sometimes it goes awry. And instead of giving a sort of negative example, I'll give you sort of funny ones. This is from a great piece. I've got the citation in here. If anybody wants to follow up on this, it was a really humorous but telling piece in the New Yorker by Patricia Marks, where she signed herself up for a handful of AI romances. So she was building relationships with AI bots, and then was kind of seeing what would happen from it, right? So she shares these examples where AI gets it wrong. There's hallucinations, right? The square root of a goat is 1. Cow's eggs are healthy and nutritious food. Lucy, by the way, was taken offline. An experimental bot called Delphi, designed to answer ethical questions, said that genocide is fine if it makes people happy, and that it's acceptable to eat babies if you are really, really hungry. This is all from information that's out there on the internet, but it's not contextualized, right? So we get these hallucinations, which, are sort of funny. Cow's eggs, healthy and nutritious, that's hilarious. But we can see how it put puzzle pieces together, right? So we also then still need to be doing our thinking. And that's where we step in with how we approach this work, which is critical media literacy, right? So American definition of media literacy: the ability to access, analyze, and produce a variety of media. Our work is in critical media literacy. We're looking at the behind the scenes. We're looking at the power of ownership, production, and distribution, as well as how power operates as a result. So we are concerned as human beings and as educators with sort of what we see on the screen, right? What it is that we're scrolling through, what it is that we're watching, what it is that we're reading, what we're listening to, etc. Absolutely, we are concerned with that. And we think that analysis of that representation is really, really important. But almost more so is we're looking at the behind the scenes, because we wouldn't get anything on that screen if it weren't for the power behind it, right? When we look at the Kardashian family, for example, they are famous for being famous, right? Kim Kardashian is actually first famous because her mother sold her sex tape and monetized it, right? Everybody call your mother after this and just thank them for not doing that, right? Famous for being famous. Oh my gosh, they're beautiful, or they have all of these like glamorous lifestyle. Absolutely, no doubt about it. But what's the behind the scenes, right? Somebody managed that, somebody produced it, somebody greenlit it to get it released. That's kind of what we're looking at with critical media literacy, is that power behind it. That's why a lot of what we talk about with surveillance technologies or generative AI or anything is, how did it get to us? Who's the corporation? What's the corporation doing potentially to divide us or devalue the human of this, right? And so we engage in a process of continuous critical inquiry. What is known about fill in the blank, right? Whatever we're talking about. How do we know this? Right? We know a lot of stuff, but how do we know it, right? Critical media literacy asks us to really get granular about our knowledge development. Context, right? What is the context for understanding what it is that we're talking about? And what is the impact on individuals in society? We spend a lot of time in our days probably with a lot of things that we don't exactly know how they work. I mean, I drive my car to and from work every day, or the grocery store or whatever. Ask me how a car works, I don't know. It turns on when I turn it on, it turns left, it turns right, I'm good. It parks, right? I'm good. What are the guts of that, right? How does that, so that's what we're trying to look at here.
I want to speak to that, but it made me think of how whenever I go to get my car worked on, they give me fill out a survey of how was my performance. I'm like, I don't know. What do I know about
My
cars?
car works.
Yeah, it drives. I guess you did a good job. Yeah, and I think this is where I would say this is where I make a plea for why I think we do have a responsibility in education to start talking about AI in the classroom more critically, go beyond the cheating thing. And Allison and I were two early people who were coming out publicly critical of the cheating moral panic, writing about that, saying let's take the temperature down a notch and figure out what this is and how students are using it before we lecture them. But I think it can't. The reason why I didn't like blaming cheating, we can't just reduce AI to use it or don't use it. I think what I would encourage us to do in education is to demystify it in the classroom. Here I think if academic work of people like Gary Smith or Meredith Broussard is very helpful, but even industry studies, if you really read the internal studies, they are critical of AI. Like Apple had a huge study saying that, look, this is not intelligent. None of these AI bots are doing what they say they can do. So it's even people in industry, if you're not swayed by the academics, draw this conclusion. But I think that's helpful to bring into the classroom and then demystify the why. So not just don't use it, but why not use it. So we talked about the disinformation aspect of it. There was a recent study that came out and said that of all the AI bots that were studied, 45% of the time when they summarize an article, they get it wrong. It's basically 1 out of every 2 times they're going to get it wrong. Would you trust a human who lied to you 1 out of every 2 statements? Like, absolutely not. But people are relying on these AI bots to summarize things for them so they don't have to read them. There's also concerns about atrophy. So using this in certain areas may be beneficial, but what about when you use it so much you stop the thinking process or you stop the writing process? What's that going to look like? Gary Smith has always said in his lifetime he doesn't think AI is going to be as smart as humans. But he said, I kind of changed my conclusion because now if everybody uses AI, they may just get stupider. Yeah. And so in that case, AI will be as smart as humans, was sort of his joke on that. And then it hallucinates things as well. So it's also some of the things, it's not necessarily that it's just wrong, it's that it didn't happen, it's non-existent. There was a lawyer who got embarrassed for this. They used AI to make a legal brief, submitted it, and it was a bunch of case law that never existed. But the all-time most embarrassing, this was in Canada, they did a study, this was educators with a government funding. They did a study on ethics and AI, and they used AI to write it, and it fabricated studies in the AI ethics piece for the education in Canada. So it can be humiliating to use this stuff as well if you over-rely on it. It can be a career killer. God forbid you ever get caught doing something like that. And then, as Allison said, it also just gets things wrong and replicates ideas that are out there. It cannot come up with new ideas. So whatever it's producing, at best, is something that's already out there. We still need to remind folks, education, especially here in higher education, we produce knowledge. We figure things out. We come up with new ideas, new perspectives, new critiques. AI is never going to do that. That's not going to happen. And handing over what we do here in higher education to these AI bots really threatens the existence of that. And we don't want to spend all day talking about how important higher education is in the production of knowledge. But it is, and even not just in a, my kind of bleeding heart here, commitment to democracy, but also in industry. Industry always likes to talk about how education is inefficient, right? But that's because we do all the inefficient work to produce knowledge, and then they commercialize it. We do all the R&D for them here. So even industry has, I think, a reason to support these institutions as well. So I think in a classroom we should demystify it like that instead of saying, hey, stop cheating. I think it goes a lot further.
And to that end, learning and doing anything new is inherently uncomfortable, right? Is anybody in here, I am not, but is anybody in here a marathon runner or a long distance runner? Okay, so here's what I know about long distance running. You don't get up one morning and say, I think I'm gonna run a marathon today. You start by running to the bottom of your driveway and falling over out of breath. And then one day you get to run back. Then you go a little further, and then you go a little further, right? Learning anything new is inherently difficult. Anybody in here started weightlifting? You start with these, maybe at the time feel a little wimpy 2 pound, and then you're like, whoa, that's so hard. And then you move up, and then you move up, and you move up. Let us be uncomfortable. Some point in time, we started being afraid of being uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable, not being unsafe, not being in danger, but being uncomfortable allows us to grow, allows us to expand, allows us to develop. Let's start getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, because that's what's going to help us make change. The pressures that we are all under, and I include us together, although I think students, your pressures are different than mine, but we are all under a pressure that says, gotta get it right away. AI seems to get it so fast, right? You plug in that prompt into ChatGPT and boom, you have a paper, you have a screenplay, you have a meal plan, you have an exercise routine, you have a playlist. The pressure that we feel is these technologies get it right away. No, they don't. No, they don't. But also, let's push back against that pressure and say it's okay to get it wrong because that's learning. It's okay to be uncomfortable because I'm going to move through that discomfort. It's okay to, and I'm going to use these words on purpose, say something stupid or dumb. I don't want to say anything that sounds stupid, right? I don't want to say anything that sounds dumb. Please, sound stupid, sound dumb. Sound stupid and sound dumb 50 times a day because then you're going to learn from it. And that's what we want to be doing, right? I want my students to say dumb stuff because then we can move through that. I say dumb stuff all the time, and then I'm going to move through it. Let's be okay being uncomfortable, and let's keep asking a bunch of questions. And I think given our time, maybe it's time to start hearing from y'all. Your dumb stuff, your stupid stuff, your brilliant stuff, your questions, your comments, so that we can move this from us talking at you into a bit more of a conversation.
Sure. So, let's go around the room again. There you go.
I like dumb stuff, then they can be elected.
Hi, thank you. This is very much so needed on the great day. So waking us up. So I'm reading this right off here because can't anything, I guess. But how would you navigate conversations with educators who are like very pro AI use, like particularly in like the business field where they're not necessarily always looking for AI to create new ideas and maybe looking for AI to do something like organize data, like alphabetize it even?
So I tend to be, just as a person, I tend to kind of be an outcomes thinker. One of my struggles really is like process, like slowing down and doing the process. So I think I would ask a celebratory person, what do you want what are you looking for, right? What do you want your outcome to be? And then maybe along the way, trying to map on some critical questions, right? So for myself, I get to then be practicing process, which is a struggle for me, right? It's hard for me. I just kind of want to get to the end and see what that looks like, right? So if you, whoever the you is in this case, is somebody who celebrates AI, then I would come in as the sort of critique of it, because then maybe through that dialogue, through that communication, we can get to a place where we're each being responsible to the other. There probably are some good things. I'm not going to be a total grump about AI, right? But I am hesitant, I am skeptical, and so how can that celebration and my skepticism kind of work together? Because ultimately this is on us, right? We're the ones that are living with this, we're the ones that are operating with this, and if we can bring in a little healthy skepticism and share that, then maybe we all move forward a bit more responsibly. Also, maybe I'm being a total Pollyanna about that and I'm just going to get upset. I'm willing to take that risk.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think if you're ever trying to change someone's mind, questions usually work better than declarative statements. And when it comes to the kind of techno-utopians, I don't mind, like I said, anybody who wants to use AI, like absolutely go for it. My only concern is if you don't understand AI while you're using it. If you understand AI and you still want to use it, that is your life. I'm totally supportive of that. So for techno-utopians, usually the areas I find that they don't wrestle with enough, at least for my liking, is the issues of surveillance and privacy. So if you have these students using this stuff in the classroom and they're giving up their private information to this corporation, what is this corporation doing with that information? What sort of vulnerabilities does this student have? Are they a victim of stalking? Do they have contested migrant status? You can go down the list, right? Do they want their private information out there? I think those kinds of conversations can be helpful because it's things that people don't think about with AI. They're enamored by like the job prospects and not these kinds of threats. So I like to go that route. And I find by asking that, you'll at least get people to admit, like, we don't fully understand this yet, or there's things I need to think about as well. And then anytime you can, remind them that it's not just that it's occasionally gets things wrong, it mostly gets things wrong. So are you teaching students to use something that's getting something wrong is a question I would like to ask as well.
Thank you.
When we were working on the surveillance book, we did interviews with teachers about their use or mistrust or struggle with surveillance technologies in the classroom. And one of the folks that we talked about mutually beneficial relationships, that young people, and maybe this is the world that you live in, maybe you feel this, recognize that you are giving away a lot of your privacy for some of your social media sites, your TikToks, your Instagrams, etc. But that it feels like a mutually beneficial relationship because you're getting something fun and entertaining out of it. You're willing to give up your information, you're willing to give up your data because you get something fun. That line, there was a line drawn with educational technologies because the idea was that students and teachers, classrooms and schools are giving up a ton of data and not really getting anything in return. It isn't a mutually beneficial relationship. So that's also like an entry point, is to say, what are we each getting out of this? To Nolan's point of like, hey, if you know how this stuff works and you want to use it, go for it, right? We are not in a position to tell folks, great, now you've heard our talk, so never use GenAI again, right? Now you've heard our talk, cancel Instagram and TikTok. Not at all. But you deserve, all of us deserve, as users of this, as producers of this, right? If any of you are posting anything on these sites, to understand how they work so that we can be better informed about it.
Thank you.
So just quickly on that, you mentioned techno-utopianism many times. Let's talk about dystopianism for a minute. Dark Enlightenment, transhumanism, Curtis Yarvin in particular. Folks that people don't seem to know about. Peter Thiel at Palantir with Alex Karp and the views and things that they're espousing and the way in which they're really moving that industry, and it's affecting everybody because the technology is so increasingly ubiquitous and we're reliant upon it. Instructure was just purchased not long ago. They run Canvas. Right, and I know you and I, Nolan, fought at Faculty Senate and lost a long time ago about how that was working. We got shouted over about, hey, wait a minute. And of course, people didn't realize that there was data harvesting going on. And so since you both have written about this, is there anything you can sort of say about that element of it, which I happen to see is quite insidious, because we don't, the bigger problem is that people just don't talk about it yet. There you go. Another one, right? So maybe if you can talk a little bit more about some of that. So folks that are using these things because we use them to teach with, what are we? What is the 30-page 2-point font agreement that someone didn't read and clicked agree because they had to take the units example?
Yeah, excellent. I'll try and keep this somewhat succinct, but this is my jam. So part of kind of that demystifying of the tech that we were talking about earlier, and Mickey started to talk about this now, is really understanding how the owners and operators of this tech see the world. And I think there's an important political component and an important economic component. I'll start with the economics real quick. And if any of you were around watching Congress in 2018, watching any of the hearings, you'll see why this is an important fact. Basically, Congress was freaked out at the time that there was this spread of fake news, and they were interviewing leaders of big tech. But it became very clear very quickly they did not understand the industry at all. So they were asking questions that were like, I don't even know. Just basic questions like, how do you make money? Like that kind of basic question. And the answer is, and this is why there's, I think, an analogy between AI today and the internet back then. Initially, when like the internet was commercialized, they didn't actually know how to make money. This is kind of forgotten to history. It was a lot of speculation. The most famous of which is pets.com. There's a ton of money in pets.com, but nobody really knew what pets.com was, and then it lost all of its value in the dot-com bubble burst. But it had a ton of investment. After the dot-com bubble burst, another major event happened, which was 9/11. And after 9/11, the government wanted to start to monitor digital communications. They believed the 19 hijackers had communicated online, and they wanted to monitor all communications. This created a new industry, which was an industry for data. And it wasn't just government who wanted data, it was also industry. So like your health insurer probably wants to know how much you smoke, your car insurance wants to know how fast you drive, your local police want to know if you're engaged in any threats, or mental health professionals want to spot suicide before it happens, and so on and so on. There's this big market for data out there, and so the name of the game became like, how do we collect as much data as possible to create what they call psychographic profiles of individuals. Profiles where we can predict what people will do, and if we have enough data, maybe nudge them to do things we want them to do. And they took a trick from the gambling industry, which if you ever go gambling, let's say you have like $100 and you put $10 in the machine, you lose it, put 10 in, you lose it, put 10 in, you win 5. You get this dopamine hit because you won. And you're like, yes, I want to win again, 10 more, 10 more, 10 more, then you win 10. You're down a ton of money, but that dopamine hit, it keeps you going. You keep chasing that first high even though you're losing. That's exactly what social media does. We're chasing the likes, we're chasing the follows, we're chasing the comments, and the structure is designed to keep you addicted to the screen. This is why it overlaps with fake news. The stuff that keeps us on the screen is stuff that confirms our bias or appeals to hate and fear. That's exactly what fake news does well. So you have this vast data collection. So we talk about the mutually beneficial relationship folks feel like they have with social media. Sure, I give up privacy, but I get something in return. If you understand it that way, it's okay. It's when people say it's free that it really bothers me. You're giving up your privacy. And as we argue in the book, unfortunately, you usually don't know why you need privacy until it's gone. You find out the hard way that you needed privacy. And in particular in the classroom, it should be a place of privacy, right? We talked about dumb questions earlier. Dumb questions are part of the learning process. When students feel like everything they do is being recorded and tracked and used against them, they're less likely to take those risks and ask those questions, which kills the learning process. So there's that component. So that's kind of the economic component is all about collecting data. This is why when you go to a restaurant And they say, it's a 2-minute wait, can I get your phone number? I'm like, I could just stand right here if you need me to. They're like, no, give me your phone number. Because they want more of your data. They want to be able to collect more information. That one just pisses me off, sorry. The political component, though, goes back to what I said earlier about this is an industry who hates people. Democracy is predicated on the idea that humans can determine their own destiny. We can make decisions through the electoral process. We can use our constitutional rights to agitate those who are representatives to give us the type of society we want. A lot of people in Silicon Valley don't like that model. It emphasizes humans too much. And one of the major thinkers of Silicon Valley is a guy named Curtis Yarvin, who's increasingly gotten a little more coverage, but he's a major thinker. He thinks democracy is an outdated system and that we should have a leader, which is not a king, they call it a CEO. And that tech experts should use things like AI to make determinations about what's best for the society and cut humans out. He is a major influence on Silicon Valley folks like Peter Thiel, who is now part of working with the federal government to collect all federal government data on all of us. He was also a major influence on the vice president, J.D. Vance, who used to call Trump American Hitler, but had to change that. These folks were, what's that?
I said or not.
Or not.
Apparently that's okay
He felt the pressure for some reason.
Yeah.
But they have this anti-democracy position that they're arguing in real time. And you could sort of take a little safety in the fact that they were mostly aligned with Democrats, that is, big tech was. And Democrats, one thing you can always know about Democrats, they will rescue defeat from the jaws of victory. But now those Silicon Valley folks have actually surrounded the Republican Party and Trump now. And so we have a consolidation of this economic and political vision. So when we talk about data collection, yeah, I'm not really too concerned that you guys post some funny, maybe offensive meme and it could come back to haunt you 20 years from now. But what about your entire life, from the crib to the grave, when they have that data? What can be done with that information? That's the scary part, and the fact that they've already established that they don't have any faith in democracy is what adds to those fears.
And we know this is a problem from Cambridge Analytica, which we studied years ago. That was 2017-18, that we've already seen the kind of issues that go along with that and how it can impact elections.
Yeah.
So just a couple quick examples of some of that, to Mickey, to your point of the 30-page 2-point type. Anybody in here used to be or maybe currently are on Snapchat? And did you ever read the terms of service? Mm-hmm. Buried in the terms of service is that Snapchat owns your face.
Yeah.
So that's kind of weird if you ask me, right? What does it mean for a company to own your face, right? It means that they own all those pictures, right? They can keep them. So even if you posted a picture when you were 12 or 13 and it's like super awkward and weird, Snapchat owns your face. A kind of tangential example, but I promise it'll cycle back in. Does anybody know the food delivery service, Daily Harvest? It's like frozen, healthy food. So very long story short, Daily Harvest ran into a bit of a problem where some mushroom dish had a certain level of toxicity in it, and people were in the hospital, and it was very mysterious. And here's a place where social media giveth and social media taketh away. The way that this was discovered was that people were posting on Reddit threads, like Daily Harvest Reddit threads. I'm pretty sure I got sick from X, I don't even remember what it was. But truly, like in the hospital for days, weeks at a time, medically compromised for life. Like it built chronic medical intestinal problems and organ problems that some of these folks will never ever get better. The immediate reaction might be sue Daily Harvest, right? Nope. In their 30-page 2-point, you agree to the terms of service, is that there is no legal form of retaliation if they screw up. So they can poison you, and you can have tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars of hospital bills and be compromised for the rest of your life because of a dish, and there's no responsibility because you signed that away, right? These things are written, these terms of service are written in such a way that we do not read them because it's super convenient to just click through. We are ultimately the ones that then get hurt and get harmed because none of us have the money that these massive corporations have to be able to counter that narrative, right? And it does take, I've done it in my class where we've done like little tests of like how long it takes to read. They are arduous to read. Why would we do that when convenience is what is presented to us? Then there's some things that you might experience as students. So there's a company, it used to be called Glean, it's now called Genio. I don't know if y'all have that here at Ithaca. It is a note-taking software. In some ways, it is great. Any student with documented accommodations for note-taking. Back in the day, those would be handwritten by a fellow student, scanned in, uploaded. You're dealing with people's messy handwriting, no doubt about it. Then maybe we started typing notes, but it's still got a time lag. Glean/Genio comes in with no time lag, because students who have documented accommodations can get software onto their laptops that then records the lecture. I don't necessarily know about New York, but in Massachusetts, where I am, we're two-party authentication for recording, and so therefore you're violating students' rights in a Massachusetts classroom if you're recording without consent, right? Also, it's built-in racism, etc. Sorry, did you?
I can speak to say that we do not use Genio here, and New York State is a one-party.
Is one party. Okay, so Massachusetts is two parties. So if any student wants to bring in Genio into the classroom, it is in theory illegal without getting everybody's consent. The company says, oh, by walking in the classroom door, it's implied consent. I don't know how I feel about implied consent, right? There's also built-in racism into this because it doesn't understand accents. So when it is recording classes, it can't accurately pick up on accents. And I mean it as generic as that. That is truly the language, is that it doesn't understand. Everybody has an accent. Like, what do you mean you can't? I don't get that. But okay, fine, let's move on. It's all shiny bells and whistles. You get all sorts of fun little badges and like way to goes for what, right? For what? And then last but not least, Turnitin, which I'm guessing most people are familiar with here, right? Turnitin does two things. One, it doesn't do accurate plagiarism detection because nothing does. But it sure captures the language that young people are using in their written work, which then is sold to advertisers and marketers. So y'all are doing the labor of advertising and marketing, I'm assuming without getting paid, right? It captures all of your data too, because it sort of knows who you are, it knows what you're reading, what your teachers are assigning you, etc. So there's a whole host of labor that's going on that y'all aren't getting paid for, even though you're doing that kind of work. And so this is where we can like sort of operate and move through all these relationships that are grounded on a complete lack of trust. Right? Any one of us that may or may not be, from the instructor side, presented with Turnitin. I get it. Finding plagiarism is really, it's arduous for your instructors. And I'm sure it feels terrible, like that moment that you're turning it in, going, God, I hope I don't get caught, right? None of this feels good. All of it is grounded in a lack of trust. And a lack of trust gets to keep us separated and compartmentalized. And it invites us to forget what the sort of corporation and behind the scenes are doing.
And I want to just jump in real quick, because I know we're running out of time, and I want to make sure I just have a couple of solutions that I like, that I would encourage you all to consider as well. This stuff can be overwhelming, but I think there is a lot that can be done. One of the things I've advocated for, I really think we need to break up the big tech monopolies. This is a long time coming. Way too much power. I mean, Amazon's AWS goes down the other day, and we have like half the market disappears. That is not sustainable. So I think breaking up these big monopolies needs to be a goal. I think also we need to deal with accountability. I don't want to freak you guys out about things, but this image ownership, with now AI moving in the direction where it can create real life images, I can already see kind of the bullying and the problem coming down the pipeline of what we're going to see. And you know, people write about this about 10 years ago, like, say someone makes a video of your image, like a sex video or something like that. They legally have a right to it. It's the ownership of it. Who's going to be held accountable for the damage, the mental health damage, or whatever else happens? Imagine bullying in school if you can use these things easily to make fun of other people in classes. So I think we need to get accountability very quickly for these companies, because right now they can do what they want, and there's no real way to sue them, as you point out, freaking poison people. Another thing I've proposed, and well, Mark Blythe proposed it, but I support it, is a data dividend. If they're taking all this data and making all this money off it, I would like to get legislation where they have to pay us. And you can do that at the institution level. Ithaca could do that. If you're going to sign these third-party agreements with these school-approved platforms, put something in there to make sure the students get money back. I'm sure what'll happen is the platform won't want to sign with Ithaca. Great. Maybe you can do some in-house stuff that's just used here in the school and doesn't go into like the private commercial market. Do some like proprietary software or something like that. So I think there are some ways in which to push back. Also, I encourage you all to think about your digital footprint. These different platforms you use or devices you use, do what I call a cost-benefit analysis. Write out the positives, write out the negatives. See, is it worth it for you? Is the risk of giving up your privacy worth it for this platform or this tool or whatever? And make an informed decision about that. So those are just some of the solutions I want to make sure we got in there before the end.
Yeah, and also in Denmark recently proposed a law that copyrights your image, your face, your voice.
Oh, right to be erased too.
Right to be erased as well. So, I mean, there are legislative solutions potentially in other countries that look at this from a more humanistic perspective and don't want your entire existence to be colonized for profit by data corporations.
Sometimes it feels overwhelming, I think, right? I mean, I know we can look at our environment, our mediated and technological environment, and be like, it's so big, there's nothing I can do. There are little tiny things that you can do, and those do add up, right? The right to be erased, the digital dividend. If you can separate your technology, do so. That obviously has economic and class elements to it. If you have school-issued devices and those are your only devices, then maybe you can't separate them, which also indicates a larger conversation we need to have about class divisions. Pay attention to where AI might already be in your workflow and how you feel about that. I find it a wee, tiny, itty-bitty act of resistance. I do not let my email or my word processing finish my words. Oh, those are my words. I'm finishing them, and I'm gonna maybe misspell them, and I'm okay with that. I will go back and fix it. It's a tiny act of resistance, it's mine. Turn off your notifications on your phone. Don't let your phone tell you when you're to look at things. When do you want to look at pictures? When do you want to check your text messages or your emails? Don't let it be dictated to you, right? Clear your cache. Let it get rid of the memory of it. Reject cookies. That is usually a button, and it is really fast. And if you can't reject the cookies really quickly, go to another site. Give yourself a little opportunity to protect yourself, and then keep asking questions, keep staying in conversation. There's such the great opportunity from these technologies to give us the sense of being alone and being the only one with this struggle. No, you're not. You're not alone, and you're not the only one with this struggle. Keep the conversation happening. Don't use proper nouns where you don't need to, right? We all talk about Xerox and Kleenex and Googling. Just say the word search. Don't work for that company, unless they are paying you, at which point, good on you, and you can take us out to lunch, right? But just search. I just need to look this up. I need to search this. Why do their advertising for them? Tiny little acts of resistance brings our humanity back into the center.
So we're about out of time, so I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank all of you for coming here today, and please give a nice round of applause for our guests, Dr. Nolan Higdon and Dr. Allison Butler. And special thanks to Park Productions. Again, I'm Mickey Huff from the Park Center for Independent Media. We'll have several other events this semester. As I noted, there's information on the back table. Feel free to take it with you on your way out. And anybody that wants to stick around, our guests are here. They're going to be speaking to my first year experience class at 1 o'clock, but we have a little bit of time right now. So if some of you want to come and speak to our guests and maybe ask them some more questions or get any other information or stay in touch with them, please feel free to do that. And again, thanks so much for coming, and have a good day.